right. Hello, everybody. Looks like folks are starting to filter in, but Yaron is here, so we can go ahead and get started. Thank you, everybody, for coming. This is, of course, the WIMSE interim meeting. And if you did not know, this is Workload Identity in multi-system environments. If you are looking for another working group, I don't know why you're here, because it's not even the full IETF meeting and for you to wander into the wrong room. But today, everything that we do, because this is an official interim meeting, is covered by the IETF note well. So make sure you note it well. Anything that you say is counted as a contribution to the IETF, and basically, be nice, work together. We're all here to do good work. And with that, today we are going to be talking about the agentic AI use cases for WIMSE. And Peter, if you'd like to say anything, feel free to chime in. Otherwise, we can hand it over to Yaron.
That's pretty much it. I think just some context for folks that we had a really good meeting in Madrid where Yaron talked about some agentic AI use cases, and as a follow-up to that, there was sufficient interest that we felt that it needs a little bit more time and an opportunity for the working group to explore further. So just some context for this meeting as well.
All right, sounds good.
All right. Just making sure that you can see and hear me.
Yes,
Yep.
we can.
You are very zoomed in, but yes.
Yeah. Well,
it's
I
only a
have
little
absolutely
scary.
no control of that, so I apologize for that. Thank you, Justin and Peter, for the introduction. I will share the screen with my door in the background and the slides. Maybe I should be running the slides.
Yep, you should have control as it's loading up.
Yeah. All right.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so so we had 15 minutes or so about this in Madrid, and we had the beginnings of a good discussion. My goal for today is to cover more or less the same ground, but going into a bit more depth on some of the issues, and then mostly to have an open discussion. Please do not hesitate to jump in during the during the presentation. I will try to cover all of my slides, but it's mostly about the discussion. So we spent some time in Madrid talking about the motivation for why agentic AI is interesting for the industry, for us. And so I'm not going to go into that again. I will sort of take it for granted that we as a working group care about service to service interactions and their security. And a great and important part of this traffic will be agentic or AI agents already in the near future. So we want to understand how these things meet with the WIMSE architecture and the WIMSE protocol. And in Madrid, I basically described it as a problem in 4 parts. One is about identity. There's attestation, so who owns and who created the agent. There's a lot of interest and a lot of complexity in authorization models for agentic AI. And last and absolutely not least is the question of transport and specifically integration or how WIMSE interoperates with agent-to-agent protocols that are already out there and that may be emerging. So starting with workload identity or agent identity, this is my slide from Madrid, where essentially I'm asserting that the identity for agents is just as complex as the existing world of microservices, and even more so. Agents may be autonomous, may be operating on behalf of a person. That person can come with a bunch of complexity. So it's not only a person, it's a role. It may be a role within an organization. It may be a person operating on behalf of a role in an organization, and so on and so forth. All of this complexity is actually amplified with agents because agents are more flexible, and on the other hand, we want to apply more strict policies to agents because they are often, even today, over-permissioned and are likely to become even more over-permissioned as people offload more and more responsibilities into agents. All that in mind, my personal opinion on this is that this whole area of modeling the identity of agents is not appropriate for WIMSE and probably even outside of the IETF domain of expertise. And I welcome anybody who disagrees. All right, moving on. Yes, Dean.
Yaron, I don't necessarily disagree with your assertion, but can you explain a little bit more about what it is about IETF that makes this problem external to IETF, or makes this as a problem that shouldn't exist in IETF around the identity management of these agents? And if it shouldn't exist in IETF, where do you think it should exist?
Traditionally, the people who have looked at these problems were other organizations, in particular OpenID. I have nothing against IETF diving into this, but this has not been the case in the past. Does it answer your question?
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Joe?
Hey, Yaron. This is Joe Salloway. One of the things, though, we do have a draft on identifiers, and while this isn't the whole scope of identity as we may as you probably you're intending, there is some intersection here that I think we will have to deal with at some level within the specifications. I think it was also brought up on the list today as to, like, we have some ambiguity in the way we define identifiers, which is somewhat intentional. But we'll have to figure out how this interacts with the rest of the identity ecosystem. And so I don't think we can say we we completely are separate from whatever happens with identity, but there needs to be some coordination there, or we're not going to be able to fulfill our roles of authentication and other types of things within the system.
I totally agree, and realistically, I think we will come up with a simplistic solution, and we will have to modify it as we go. Peter?
Hey, Yaron. I do want to just clarify a little bit around what it is that you think does not belong in the IETF, right? So the slide says workload identity. So are you thinking that like workload identity doesn't belong in the IETF? Or is there specific aspects around this agent identity topic that you think should not be or is out of scope for work in the IETF? Or yeah, just if you can clarify what it is that you think does not belong.
So what I think does not belong in IETF, and in particular in WIMSE, is information modeling of the complexity of agent identity. So how agents represent individuals, as well as the complexities that already live with human identities.
Okay, and that include things like delegation models or things like that, which is perhaps, well, OAuth is a delegation model, right? Do you think that sits outside OAuth and is a authorization delegation mechanism? So, like, does that belong? I'm just curious how you would think about something like that, for example.
OAuth is a way to deal with delegation, as a protocol to deal with delegation. It's not a model of who delegates to who. And so I think we would need some more explicit modeling of these relations as we go.
Okay, but the key thing is you're thinking the information modeling piece is out of scope.
That's my opinion, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Attestation. We're not seeing agent marketplaces, but there is discussion in the industry about agent marketplaces happening. So we are likely to have cases of agents that are developed by one organization, then being sold and maybe verified by another organization, and then deployed by a third organization. And your authorization policy might want to look at each one of them for its decision. So this is somewhat similar to attestation, to code attestation in other areas today. WIMSE could decide to work on that. And my opinion is that we in WIMSE should start with simple or simpler attestation for service code. So what happens if service A wants to call service B, and either or maybe both of them want to to include a verified statement about the security posture in the sense of confidential computing. I think that is more more relevant for today's situation, and that could evolve into what we need for agentic AI, but probably we're just not there yet. Yes, Peter.
Hi, this is Peter without I. Right, I just have a clarifying question that about attestation. So, the attestation about agentic AI or their capabilities, I'm thinking of two ways might be doing it. I don't know which direction you might be looking at. The one way is to attest to the capabilities it can provide to the outside, mostly like the agent card in the A2A world. That's the one way of thinking it, and the other way is to attest the underlying systems and the hardware, the OS, and the platform of that is currently running this AI agent. So I don't know which way that you are referring to in this case.
So I think the second one you're describing is more traditional attestation, and this is where I propose that we start. And what I describe on this slide is the new additional requirements that come with AI agents. And I think it's too early for that because we, the industry, don't know yet what's needed.
Right, I agree that the second thing is the more traditional and the more reasonable way to start with, because I might be thinking the first way, and I can think a million problems that can happen with that, because we might have millions of previously when we do remote attestation, we might have limited number of vendors and limited number of verifiers, but when agentic AI, people can post their own AI agent, and the verification model, what should we verify, and that's going to be slightly more different than we do configuration checks. This is just my opinion.
I agree. Peter with an E and I, sorry.
Right, I'm Peter with an I. So you're on, when I think about attestation, specifically in the IETF, of course, right, I think about rats. And I'm curious about this. How is attestation, are you using attestation sort of, is this a different kind of attestation than what the rats working group would typically be considering? I'm just kind of curious if why not rats? Why would this be something that we would consider in WIMSE, for example?
So first of all, rats is focused, at least today, on the traditional attestation that we just talked about. My personal opinion, and others might disagree, is that it's on rats to come up with the infrastructure for attestation, with the data definitions, formats, and some of the protocols, but it's not realistic that rats will be the home of anything, any IETF solution that uses attestation. And therefore, I think if we want to incorporate attestation into WIMSE service to service, I think that should be on us. Again, others might disagree.
Okay, and then, I mean, the other thing is, as I read the slide, right, it also reads more like it is more about the providence of the agent, perhaps, right? It's about, this. You have one organization that develops the code. There's another one, a marketplace, where it gets distributed, and then I think your example, right, somebody else might run it. And I'm curious, is this more about where the code came from, So it's maybe more like a skid-like problem or a supply chain problem than it is necessarily an attestation problem.
Okay, so I'm thinking here of the supply chain problem. I call it attestation. I'm just fine using a different terminology for that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
All right, moving on. Authorization. So I think many would agree that authorization is probably the most important problem with AI agents because people tend to attach um, too many capabilities in the form of tools to agents. And therefore, we need some way to control them to ensure that they don't overstep our security policy. Right now, the WIMSE service-to-service protocol does not define anything on authorization, other than we say that people can do authorization, but we don't have any way to carry authorization decisions or policies within the protocol. This is different from the case for auth. And I'm asking whether this is something we want to add into WIMSE with the caveat that, as far as I can see, even in the auth world, we only went so far. We defined the community defined an abstract representation of permissions, but you cannot have a fully interoperable well, it's difficult to have a fully interoperable end-to-end solution where you get fully interoperable authorization policy enforcement using the capabilities that are standardized, which to me shows that there's not enough interest in having interoperable authorization. Fleming.
Fleming, if
hear
you're
you.
speaking, you're muted.
Still muted. Okay. So Joe, please.
Oh yeah. So I think again, like there's pieces that, you know, fully defining authorization is kind of difficult and gets into what, you know, different scenarios that different vendors or different deployments want to achieve. But I think again, there's probably some boundaries or borderlines between where we want to, you know, where we can make some definition on, say, how an identity is used or may be used in terms of what it represents. and where additional information may be needed. So, providing how this may fit into what we do may fit into an authorization framework as far as an identifier. And I think this is pretty close to my comment on identity, in that somehow these pieces have to fit together in a reasonable way so that you can build an authorization system with these pieces. And that may require us to get a certain level into these discussions of authorization and delegation. Yeah.
I think the question
All right,
of authorization goes.
Yaron, you're muted.
Am I?
I can hear you, Ron.
Yeah, I can hear you on too.
Trying again.
Sorry, the problem was me. You were fine the whole time.
No problem. I think the question of authorization applies to WIMSE in general, even before agentic AI, and maybe that's something we should open within the working group. I would love for Peter and Justin to chime in.
So in drafting the charter, we were very careful to put authorization itself out of scope. But as Joe was saying, there are some boundaries around things, just because authorization is such a huge space. But there are some boundaries that do relate to how workloads process these requests from a security perspective, which of course authorization is part of that, and how you carry that information and how you project that information that might fit. So if somebody has a proposed draft, please bring it to the list, and we can debate on it there. That's my take on how it might fit.
Yeah, similar perspective here, right? We were explicit in excluding authorization because it's such an enormous space. But we also left space in the charter specifically to allow for conversation. And if there's a draft or there is a proposal, I think we definitely would want to see that. I think authorization in my mind is the number one. I agree, it's the number one problem that I hear about all the time. What is interesting is looking at what's happening outside of IETF, places like MCP, for example, which is leaning very heavily into OAuth. And I am also curious, Yaron, to get your perspective on that, right? So we're seeing this other ecosystem in the MCP world heavily leaning into OAuth. And so my question to you would be like, okay, so what is the piece that you think will be missing that, yeah, and maybe that's the purpose of a draft.
Well, as you should know, Peter, my next slides will go exactly into this question.
It's a leading question, Yaron.
Yes.
Before we move on with the presentation, Fleming raised a link in the chat, which I've added to the notes. It is a blog post from Microsoft, and Fleming said in the chat that I think there is some movement in the industry that goes counter to what the previous OAuth experience has been. So there is important context to be added to the conversation there. And that was what Fleming was getting on mic to talk about previously, but something fell over.
Yeah, and go ahead, Yaron.
Yeah, Fleming is not here to answer, but then my question is counter to the OAuth experience in what way?
Fleming, if you, mic's not working. If you speak in chat, I can convey it to the recording here. Okay, I'm not reading that URL out loud.
Yeah, but I actually read the CSA report. I believe that's the one. Personal opinion, the questions that it raises are the right questions. The solution is very opinionated and includes like pet solutions of one particular person, including some DNS alternative and like big fun protocols. So I think it'll it'll take a long time for the industry to settle these questions into a working solution.
All right. Okay, I think we can probably move on now. Thank you. Yaron, we lost your video and possibly audio.
Both, actually. That's it.
There it is. Okay, you're back.
Okay, everybody's heard about MCP, still the obligatory background slide. MCP is an open protocol for AI agents to connect with tools and data. The tool may be another agent, but today it's mostly an API. So today it's mostly not used for agent-to-agent interaction, but instead it's used for agent-to-API interaction. And the general feeling is that it's moving towards being a more general transport for agent-to-agent communication as well. The security is based on OAuth 2.1, and like each new version of the protocol includes new material on security. There's, in my opinion, a solid OAuth 2.1 solution in the June version of MCP, but it's already not the latest. MCP is widely deployed. However, most of the real-life deployment of MCP is still in the IDE to tool space. So here's my cursor, and I want to query my, I don't know, my Jira project. I will be using the MCP shim, the MCP layer, to talk to my local Jira. So that's the most common use of MCP today, but people are already using MCP for production services as well, and that's likely to become ever more common. MCP is an open community. Everybody can jump on the Discord server, but it's not an open standards organization by any means. It's still controlled by Anthropic, the company that created the protocol. So far for background, just for your impression, this is the current OAuth 2.1 dance for MCP setup or MCP connection with OAuth. I think it's based on 4 different RFCs and quite a few rounds. And this diagram is simplified. So it's the simplest way of doing it, and there are some optional parts that were omitted, but it should work. It's fully RFC compliant, and as far as I can tell, it's fully specified and usable today. So, sorry, I'll go back to that slide. Point I'm making is this is fine for the inter-organization case. So the use case that's being addressed here is that I'm running an IDE within organization 1. I want to access a service that may be run by organization 2, and I'm using OAuth, maybe with my organization's single sign-on, so OAuth and OIDC, to get to the MCP server, or to get across the API. I don't think this is intended for usage within the organization. And I think this is where we as WIMSE have an opportunity. So once we have people running service infrastructure on using the WIMSE protocol, I think we should provide them a simpler way, or a more seamless way of connecting over MCP. In particular, there's lots of discovery that's embedded into the OAuth sequence that I showed before, and that's simply not needed in the intra-organization use case. So I think there are good reasons for us to come up with a WIMSE protocol, sorry, a WIMSE profile for MCP. There are also challenges. The basic WIMSE protocol itself is not finalized, and work on the MCP side is just so much quicker than the way we do things at the IETF. So even if we decide that, yes, this is something we want to do, there are practical process questions that we would need to deal with. But I think it's worth it, and in fact, I think it would open, it would make WIMSE itself a lot more useful than it is right now, given that so many people are moving towards MCP. Peter.
When you say WIMSE profile, Yaron, can you expand on that a little bit? Are you thinking, can you just say more about what it is that you think you would profile, or what would be in such a profile?
My understanding, and I honestly haven't done the required deep dive, my understanding is that we could rip and replace the OAuth pieces for a WIMSE-based solution for authentication and authorization across MCP. So this is what I have in mind.
Okay. Yeah, I think the authentication piece that's interesting, right? I think one of the interesting challenges that I've seen in the MCP space is on the authentication side, right? In the context of OAuth, it's about client ID, client secrets. How do you replace that? Can we use, I think the idea of, can we use WITs and whippets and things like that in that context makes sense. It's less clear to me on the authorization side, right? Given that we don't really have anything on the authorization side, so maybe that is some of the extra or new drafts that you've been thinking of. So that, I think that is, yeah, I think I understand on the authentication side, it's clearer to me. I'm not so clear on what the authorization side would look like.
And I agree with you. Justin?
Yeah, one of the tricks with MCP is that since it is a proxy with two different security services, you have to contend with the authentication and authorization into the MCP server and then out from the MCP server to the service that it's wrapping separately. Where do you see WIMSE playing a role here? Is it one particular side or is it both?
I think we should. So the second part may be optional, but I think in many cases, the API on the server side, so the second API would also be implementing WIMSE. So it would make sense to cover both.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have people on the call that are active within MCP and can provide an opinion?
So I will add, speaking as chair here, that MCP is controlled by a commercial entity. It is not a standards organization. It is not an open standard by any stretch, except that Anthropic, who owns MCP and owns the community around it, has to date been pretty friendly with people coming from the outside with ideas and wanting to play nice. There is, however, none of the sort of traditional rigor or IPR protection that you would find in a standards organization. So this is not work that the IETF or the WIMSE working group would do within the MCP space, but obviously the participants in WIMSE can participate in other projects in other spaces as much as we want. So yeah, this is just to say that work done within IETF and work done within the MCP project it's more than a slight impedance mismatch between the two. They're quite different types of legal entities.
I think it's less clear-cut than that. For example, we have a CEDAR profile for, as far as I know, CEDAR is totally owned by Amazon, and yet we have an internal draft that bridges between that language and IETF controlled like format.
Okay, couple reasons why that's a bad example. One, it's an
Yes.
abandoned ID. Two, it was
Okay.
never brought in as a working group draft. So as an individual ID, it has about as much standing as something that it has less standing actually than something that you post in the chat there today, because this is part of an official meeting. Additionally, we can profile and use things that are defined all over the place. That's absolutely fine, and that's what that example is. If it is using MCP or referring to MCP from within an IETF document in RFC, then the requirements for making external references to other organizational documents and other things like that, those do exist within the IETF. We ran into this, for example, with needing to refer to some WHAT working group and W3C work from within some of the HTTP specs that I've worked on, because there are parts of the HTTP ecosystem that are not owned by IETF, and yet we still need to refer to them. There are rules around how best to do that, especially because the stability of other document streams is not nearly the archival nature of the RFC series. They're very, very different types of things. To wit, if you were to look at the MCP authorization spec 6 months ago versus what it is today, very, very different space, makes a lot of very, very different assumptions about how even the whole system is could be deployed. I expect all of that will change again, and is likely to change rapidly. So yeah, the nature of the collaboration makes a very big difference. If we're talking about just referring to, there's one set of ways that we can do that. If we're talking about WIMSE doing work in the MCP world, then that's not a thing that exists. That's people in the WIMSE working group are also doing work in the MCP space, and we can cross-reference each other as much as we like. But that, I want it to be very clear that is the line.
Fair enough. That makes sense.
All right, chair hat off. I think Peter is in the queue. Peter, did you mean to be in the queue, or did I mute myself?
mean to be in the queue. Did we lose Yaron? He's coming back. He's coming back. So Yaron, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so within the MCP community, there is currently quite a bit of attention going into the authentication side of the conversation. So I think it's a good thing to be aware of. And there's several proposals that people are exploring, and I also think there will be multiple ways in which, depending on your deployment, right? I see interest in different levels of authentication. There is, hey, let's just do better than nothing. Then there is, let's do better than secrets. And then there is sort of more, like enterprise scenarios where maybe you want to use some kind of proof of possession and cryptographic mechanism. So I think there's an opportunity maybe to engage with that conversation. But to Justin's point as well, right? It's a very different process. And to your point, the pace is much different. So I think the things that we do here in WIMSE, I believe is relevant to the same problems. I think, back to the other work that we still have ongoing, the sooner we have drafts that are complete that can be easily referenced, I think that that will also help a lot, right, to help move the conversation forward. Because the other thing that I've also sort of observed is in the MCP community, if there is a draft and that draft is either relatively stable or nearing completion, those are easier to reference and potentially adopt or use as well, just as a pragmatic observation.
Yes, and I'm told that the goal is to move the workload to workload draft into working group last call by Montreal.
I look forward to it.
Yes. Yeah. Shobo?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so in my opinion, I think there is some correlations between the MCP and some of the work that has been done in WIMSE. So if you look at the protocol in MCP, So generally, they consider two typical use cases. One is the machine use case, which means that the agent and the operations is managed by a machine itself. And another scenario is that there are the people behind it. So in the machine scenarios, typically, so I have already read some of the specifications in WIMSE. So there is a typical issues is, so if a machine wants to manage the agent to access some of the resources, so how do we gonna prove that the managers of the machine wanted to access to the resource? So this has been done for in WIMSE because we already have some mechanisms to, for example, the the identity of the machine, like the MAC address or the obtained certificate, can be some kind of intent that people want the machines to get access to some of the resources. So I think in this case, some of the work in WIMSE can be connected to MCP. So if we look at the machine scenarios, so I think this is one of the things that maybe we can work on at the present, because I think some of the people has already discussed this kind of scenarios in a separate interesting group in the last IETF meetings. So I think this is a good start that we can discuss, and then there may be some more scenarios that we consider to further extend the protocols of WIMSE to fit into the MCP. Thanks.
Thank you, and I'm looking forward to continue this discussion. Other feedback?
Just to note that we've got less than 10 minutes and you've still got 8 slides.
I believe most of them are feedback. Yes.
Oh, perfect. Excellent.
Yeah. Most of them are backup, sorry. And this is the discussion I really wanted to have. So is there interest within the working group to collaborate with MCP in some way, given all of these challenges and obviously what Justin mentioned? Yes, Joe.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that, you know, this is like from the architecture document perspective. I mean, this is a potential use case and scenario that is probably partially covered by the scenarios that we have in the current architecture document, but I doubt that it is completely covered, especially like, you know, Justin brought up that this is something we have two sides of a proxy. I mean, we don't really kind of discuss that. And there may be other things that we want to, you know, discuss in the architecture document so we understand how it affects the scope of WIMSE or doesn't affect the scope of WIMSE. So I think this would be a good thing to do to at least understand where the intersections are, and then see what you know, what can be done if there is a role for WIMSE there. That would be cool. Thanks.
Thank you. Peter?
Right, this is Peter without an I. Recently I've been discussing about the authorizations and or related security mechanisms on AI agents. So the most common question that I was counter-asked is that what's the difference between an AI agent and a microservice or a general application? And I would say the AI agent's access pattern might be more dynamic and spontaneous. And we want to contain that kind of you know, authorization security risk. And then the other counter question is that how do you do it? How can you contain this kind of dynamic risk? Or you want to make it more ephemeral, you want to make it more fine-grained, and this is the place that I don't have a good answer to, but I really hope that, you know, this could have some good answers, and many people that I discussed with, they kind of think at least the WIMSE working group should look at it and have some proper discussion about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Yes, Justin.
The queue, I was just coming on to say, looks like the queue is empty. So I think we can probably step into wrapping things up and talking next steps for this work. Did you have anything else to cover, Yaron?
No, I did not. Unless, so ideally for me, next steps would be to actually go do. I'm not hearing a lot of support for that. So let's keep the discussion going on the mailing list and see if there's interest.
All right. Sounds good. I agree. Let's take this discussion to the list. If anybody has a draft that they want to submit to talk about how things could connect to each other in a way that, is couched in IETF process and language, we are, of course, happy to consider such things here. Thank you very much for bringing up this topic with the working group, Yaron. And I'm going to turn off the slides here. And with that, we've got another interim meeting in a couple weeks, I think. Let me see. So October 7th is our next interim meeting, and then we've got one more after that prior to the meeting in Montreal in November. So see you guys all on the list. Hopefully see you in Montreal and at the interims as well. Anything else? Because I think we are about done.
That's it. Thanks, Yaron. Thanks for leading the discussion today.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Bye, all.
Thank you.